"It hurts. I can't move," she sobbed. What the Vampire King did next broke everyone. The night in Ebonmere was not like any other. The moon hung low, a dull crimson glow spilling over the jagged towers of the castle. Its light seemed almost alive, stretching its fingers across the land like a warning. Lady Seraphine lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind heavy with worry and fear. Something in the air felt wrong. She could hear the distant howl of wolves and the faint rustling of leaves outside her window. Her heart thumped as if it knew that tonight nothing would remain ordinary. Seraphine had always been cautious, the type of girl who followed rules and obeyed warnings. Yet there was something inside her, a restless curiosity, that often drew her to forbidden corners of the castle. Tonight, however, she was not wandering. She had stayed in her room, seeking the comfort of the familiar. And yet, despite the warmth of her chamber and the heavy blankets around her, a strange cold settled over her body. It started in her fingers, climbing slowly up her arms. Then her legs felt like they were sinking into invisible chains. It hurts," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. I can't move." Panic rose like a tide in her chest. She tried to lift her arms, to push herself off the bed, but nothing responded. Every attempt was met with an invisible resistance, as if her body had betrayed her. A shiver ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from the terror that she could not explain. Her breaths became shallow, quick, each one echoing in the stillness of the room. And then she heard it, a sound she would never forget, a soft, deliberate tap at her window. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could be outside at this hour? No servant would dare approach the castle at midnight. No friend would risk the dangers of the dark woods that surrounded the kingdom. And yet, the sound persisted, slow and measured, almost as if it had a rhythm designed to hypnotize her. With great effort, she managed to roll her head toward the window. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Standing there, framed by the crimson moonlight, was a figure both terrifying and beautiful. He was tall, impossibly so, with sharp features that seemed carved from marble. His hair was as dark as the night itself, falling in waves that caught the moonlight. His eyes, a deep, burning gold, locked onto hers, and in that moment the world outside her room seemed to vanish. It was him, the Vampire King, Lord Caelan. Stories of him had haunted Ebonmere for centuries. They said he was cruel, merciless, a creature of the night who fed on fear and sorrow. But there were also whispers of his tragedy, of the loss and betrayal that had made him what he was. Some said he had been a prince once, before darkness had claimed him. Others said he was beyond redemption. Seraphine had always dismissed these stories as tales meant to scare children. But now, looking at him, she felt the truth in the shadows of his presence. He did not speak at first. He merely stood there, his gaze fixed upon her, and in that silence, Seraphine felt something she did not expect. A strange, magnetic pull, as if the chains that bound her body were only physical, and her mind was being drawn toward him. Fear battled curiosity inside her. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but her voice refused. She wanted to hide, to pull the blankets over her head, but something in his eyes held her in place. Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was low, rich, and smooth, like velvet sliding over steel. "You are in pain," he said simply, "but it is not mine to cause." Seraphine's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Why can't I move?" she asked, her voice trembling. Caelan took a step closer, and with each movement the shadows around him seemed to bend and ripple. "There is a curse upon you," he said. "It is old, powerful, and tied to your bloodline. But know this, I did not place it. I am not your enemy, Lady Seraphine." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, and yet every instinct screamed that he was dangerous. "Then, why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "To watch over you," he replied, "and to protect you from what is coming." The words sent a chill down her spine. There was something in his tone, a mixture of authority and sincerity that made her question everything she had believed about him. For centuries, the people of Ebonmere had feared Kaelin, yet here he was, offering protection. And though fear still gripped her, a spark of curiosity began to bloom. Kaelin raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and a faint glow began to form around his fingers. The glow moved gently over her body, and Seraphine felt a warmth spread through her frozen limbs. Not enough to free her completely, but enough to ease the worst of the paralysis. "You will need strength," he said, "strength beyond what you have ever known." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "Strength? From you?" she asked, her voice sharp despite the fear. You are a monster." "How can you help me?" He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Monsters are not always what they seem, and heroes are often not born, they are forged." Something in her heart stirred at his words, something dangerous and forbidden. She hated him, and yet in that moment she wanted to understand him. She wanted to know why someone so feared could feel human. Kaelin tilted his head, studying her as if he were trying to read her very soul. "The curse is linked to me," he said. "I cannot undo it entirely, but I can guide you. I can teach you to resist its pull, to survive it. Survive it." The words echoed in her mind. She had thought her life was ordinary, that her problems were simple. Now she understood the depth of the danger surrounding her. And yet, despite the terror, a part of her wanted to trust him. She wanted to reach out, to touch the shadows he commanded, to feel the truth of his presence. "You speak of trust," she said, her voice shaking. "But how can I trust someone who is feared by all?" Kaelin's eyes darkened, a shadow of pain flickering across his face. "Because I have known fear too," he whispered. "Because I have lost more than you can imagine, and because if I fail, you will not survive." For a moment, silence fell between them, heavy and almost sacred. Seraphine felt a tear slide down her cheek, a tear born not of pain, but of the overwhelming weight of what was happening. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable, yet so intensely alive. "You will need courage," Kaelin continued softly. "And the courage will come from choices, from defiance, from refusing to be a victim of fate." Her mind spun with questions. Why her? Why now? Why had destiny or misfortune chosen her to bear this curse? And yet, somewhere deep inside, she sensed that this meeting, this encounter with the Vampire King, was only the beginning. The night had opened a door she could never close. Kaelin stepped back, fading slightly into the shadows. "I will return," he said. "The curse moves faster than you think. By sunrise it will test you, and I will be watching." Seraphine tried to speak, tried to protest, but her lips would not obey. All she could do was watch as he disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone in the room, her body slowly regaining some movement, but her heart trembling with questions and fear. She pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. Something had changed inside her. Fear had shifted into something sharper, more intense. A need to understand, a need to survive, a need to see him again. And though she knew it was dangerous, she also knew she could not ignore the pull between them, a pull that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Hours passed like minutes. The moon moved across the sky, casting strange patterns across her walls. Seraphine finally managed to rise from her bed, her legs unsteady but determined. She approached the window where Kaelin had stood, but outside there was only darkness, empty and silent. And yet when she looked at her wrist, she froze. A dark emblem glowed faintly on her skin, intricate and ancient. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and she understood with a sudden and frightening clarity that the curse was not just a random misfortune. It was a bond, tied to the Vampire King in ways she could not yet comprehend. Her chest tightened and tears threatened again. She whispered to the empty room, "What have I gotten myself into?" The night outside was quiet now, almost deceptively so, but Seraphine knew the truth. Nothing would ever be ordinary again. The Vampire King had entered her life, and with him, a darkness that was both terrifying and strangely beautiful. And somewhere in the shadows, he watched, waiting for the moment when their destinies would collide again. She pressed a hand to the glowing emblem, feeling a chill run through her fingers. And as dawn began to edge the horizon with pale light, she understood that the night had only begun, and that the real struggle, the real pain, and the real longing were yet to come. And in that moment, she knew she could not run. The morning in Ebonmere was gray and heavy, as if the world itself had been holding its breath through the night. Lady Seraphine sat by her window, staring at the glowing emblem on her wrist. It had not faded, and the pulsing warmth beneath her skin reminded her constantly that her life had changed forever. The curse that had gripped her body and now her soul was not a fleeting nightmare. It was real. And it was tied to Lord Caelan, the vampire king, whose presence haunted her dreams even now. She had never felt such fear and fascination all at once. The stories she had grown up hearing, the warnings from servants and noblewomen, all of it had prepared her for terror, but not for this strange, twisted curiosity. She wanted to know more about Caelan, about the curse, about the secret pain that lingered in his golden eyes. And yet part of her wanted to run, to escape the shadows that clung to him like a second skin. Her musings were interrupted by a knock at her door. She stiffened. It was far too early for visitors, and yet the knock persisted, deliberate and controlled. She hesitated, then called out, "Who is it?" A soft, familiar voice answered. "It is I, Lady Seraphine. I mean you no harm." Her heart skipped. It was Caelan. She opened the door cautiously, unsure if she should be angry, terrified, or something else entirely. He stood there, taller than the doorway, his dark hair falling over his eyes. The golden light in them had softened, almost sorrowful now, and not the fierce, predatory gleam she had seen last night. What are you doing here?" she stammered. "I told you I would return," he said simply. "There are things you must understand, truths you must face. The curse will not wait for your comfort." She looked down at the emblem on her wrist. It throbbed like a heartbeat, reminding her of the night's terror. "Then tell me." "Tell me everything," she said. Her voice was firm, though her hands shook. Caelan nodded and stepped into the room. The air seemed to darken slightly as he moved, but it was not threatening, at least not in the way that made her skin crawl. It was more like a weight, a gravity that pulled her attention entirely toward him. He sat across from her, and for a long moment neither spoke. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where truths waited to be revealed. "The curse," he began, "is older than the kingdom itself. It was born of betrayal and pain, tied to bloodlines that were meant to protect, not destroy. Your family has been connected to mine for centuries, through bonds and betrayals that no one remembers clearly anymore." Seraphine swallowed hard. "But why me? Why now?" Caelan's gaze softened, though a shadow of pain lingered. "Because the curse seeks balance, and you are strong enough, clever enough to survive it. But surviving is only the first step. Understanding it, controlling it, that is something else entirely, and for that you need guidance." Her curiosity overcame fear, and she leaned closer. "Guidance from you, the vampire king? How can I trust you?" Caelan smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Trust is not given lightly, nor should it be, but you will have to learn it if you are to survive. There are truths in the world that are not safe for mortals to know, except through the eyes of those who walk in shadows." He paused, studying her carefully. "There is magic in you, Seraphine, dormant magic, a spark that can resist the curse if it is awakened, but it will not awaken on its own. It needs patience, courage, and pain." She shivered at the words. Pain, she understood, she had felt it, but courage. Could she find it in herself? She had always been careful, cautious, afraid of stepping beyond boundaries. And yet, here was a being who demanded not only obedience but trust, a being who could destroy her with a single thought yet offered protection instead. Caelan rose suddenly and moved to the window, his form cutting a dark silhouette against the dim morning light. "Come with me," he said. "You cannot learn the truth here, in the safety of stone walls and servants' whispers. You must see the world as it is." Only then will you understand what is at stake." Seraphine hesitated. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to retreat to safety. But another part, a part that had felt the pull of his gaze all night, whispered that this was the path she had to take. I will come," she said finally. Kalen's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Good, you will not regret it." The journey began in silence. They moved through the quiet halls of the castle, down spiral staircases that seemed older than memory, and finally out into the gardens where mist curled around twisted, ancient trees. The air was cold, yet strangely alive. Shadows moved in ways that seemed impossible, stretching and twisting as if the world itself were watching. "This is where your training begins," Kalen said. "You must understand the language of the unseen. You must learn to feel the currents of magic that flow around you, even when they are invisible." Seraphine frowned. "Magic? I do not know anything about magic." Kalen's eyes softened. "Then we will begin at the beginning." He led her to a clearing where the mist seemed thickest. "Sit," he instructed, and she obeyed. "Close your eyes, breathe. Feel the air, the shadows, the pulse of life around you. Do not fear what you cannot see. It is not your enemy." She did as he said, though her heart raced with uncertainty. At first, she felt only cold and fear. But slowly a rhythm emerged, the beating of the earth, the whisper of the wind, the faint vibration in her own chest. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "Good," Kalen said softly. "Now reach for it. Do not think, do not question. Let your senses guide you." Seraphine extended her hands, hesitant at first, then with more confidence. And then she felt it, a faint warmth, a tiny spark, like a thread of light weaving through her fingers. Her eyes flew open. I felt it," she whispered. Kalen nodded. "Yes, that is your power. It is weak now, but it will grow. And it must, if you are to survive the curse and what lies ahead." Her chest swelled with both pride and fear. She had always thought of herself as ordinary, fragile, and powerless. Now she understood that she was neither. There was strength inside her, buried deep and waiting. Kalen's gaze met hers, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink around them. "Do not let fear rule you," he said quietly. "Fear will chain you more tightly than the curse ever could." Days passed, and the lessons continued. Kalen taught her to listen to the whispers of the wind, to feel the pull of shadows, to sense when danger approached before it arrived. And with each lesson, the bond between them deepened, not in the way of ordinary friendship, but something darker, more intense, and entirely undefinable. Seraphine found herself drawn to him, to his strength, to the vulnerability that flickered beneath his icy exterior. And Kalen, who had spent centuries shutting himself away from the world, began to let a small portion of trust grow toward her. He could not speak of it openly. Centuries of solitude and pain had taught him that attachments brought only suffering. But in quiet moments, when the night wrapped around them like a velvet cloak, he could not help but watch her, study her, care for her in ways he had forgotten he was capable of. One evening, as the crimson moon rose again, Kalen led her to a ruined tower beyond the castle. "Here," he said, "the shadows are old and the echoes of the past linger. You must face them if you are to understand the curse." Seraphine stepped cautiously, her hands brushing the crumbling stone. Inside, the air was thick with whispers, faint voices that seemed to speak directly to her soul. Fear gnawed at her, but she pressed forward. And then from the darkness, a figure emerged, a woman, pale and ghost-like, her eyes glinting with anger and sorrow. "Kalen," she hissed, "you should not have returned." Kalen's expression hardened, though his hand remained steady on Seraphine's shoulder. "I did what I must," he said. The ghostly woman's gaze shifted to Seraphine, and a cold shiver ran down the girl's spine. She carries the bond," the ghost whispered. "Do you know what this means?" Seraphine felt her chest tighten. The emblem on her wrist pulsed violently, as if responding to the presence of the ghost. She looked at Kalen, panic and fear mingling in her eyes. Kalen's jaw tightened, his golden eyes flashing with both anger and pain. "Do not be afraid," he said. "I will not let her harm you." The ghost laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. "You cannot protect her forever, Kaelin. The curse will claim her as it claimed you once." Seraphine's heart pounded. The lessons, the warnings, the shadows, all of it had led to this moment. And in that instant she understood that her survival would not be simple. It would demand courage, defiance, and a bond with Kaelin that neither of them fully understood yet. As the ghost vanished into the shadows, Kaelin's gaze met hers once more. "You are not alone," he whispered, "and together we will face what comes." And Seraphine knew with both fear and determination that this was only the beginning. The curse, the shadows, and the secrets of Kaelin's past had all converged on her life, and she would have to be stronger than she ever imagined to survive. The night closed around them, and as the crimson moonlight faded, Seraphine felt the pulse of the emblem on her wrist once more. It was a warning, a promise, and a challenge all at once. And deep in her heart, she understood one truth. The path forward would be dangerous, but she could no longer turn away. The forest beyond Ebonmere was alive with whispers. Mist curled around ancient trees like silver snakes, and shadows shifted as if the night itself were breathing. Lady Seraphine walked carefully behind Lord Kaelin, each step echoing faintly against the damp earth. Her heart was heavy with fear and anticipation. She had survived the cursed night in her chamber, endured the lessons in magic and shadow, and faced the ghostly wraith of Kaelin's past. Yet now, stepping into the dark forest, she realized the danger had only deepened. "Stay close," Kaelin instructed, his golden eyes scanning the mist. The tall figure moved silently, a predator in his element, yet there was a subtle softness in the way he watched her, ensuring she did not stumble. Seraphine had never felt such conflicting emotions, fear for her life, awe at his presence, and a strange, unspoken pull toward him. "Why here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why not stay in the castle where it's safe?" Kaelin shook his head, his dark hair brushing his shoulders. "The castle may be safe from ordinary threats, but not from the curse, not from what hunts you. You need to learn to survive in the world as it is, not behind walls of stone." Seraphine bit her lip. She wanted to argue, to demand comfort and protection, but the truth in his words was undeniable. The forest was alive with magic and danger, and every rustle of leaves, every shadow, could conceal a threat. She shivered, partly from cold and partly from anticipation. Hours passed as they moved through winding paths and hidden glades. Kaelin spoke little, allowing her to take in the forest, to feel the currents of power that whispered through the earth. Slowly, Seraphine began to sense it, the subtle vibrations of the land, the faint pulse of magic that seemed to hum beneath the soil. She closed her eyes and with Kaelin's guidance tried to reach it, to let it flow through her fingers like water. "You are improving," Kaelin said softly. "The curse senses your power. It will test you soon. You must be ready." "Test me?" she asked, fear sharpening her tone. "How?" Kaelin's expression darkened. "In ways that will frighten you, in ways that will demand more than courage. You may need to face yourself, your fears, your own darkness." Seraphine's chest tightened. She had always been cautious, but she realized now that her life had no choice but to change. There was no going back. Every step forward was a step into uncertainty. Yet oddly, she felt alive in a way she had never known. As night fell, they reached a clearing where the mist swirled thick and heavy. Kaelin stopped and turned to her. "Here," he said, "this is where you will face your first true trial. And I will not interfere unless it is necessary. You must rely on your strength and your courage." Her eyes widened. "Alone." "Not alone," Kaelin said, his voice low. "I am here, but I will not step in unless your life is at risk. This is part of learning, Seraphine. Part of surviving the curse." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly, and stepped into the center of the clearing. The mist thickened, curling around her like living fingers. Shadows moved at the edges of her vision, and whispers rose in the darkness. murmuring words she could not understand. Panic threatened to overtake her, but she focused on Kalen's voice, on the golden light in his eyes, and on the tiny spark of magic she felt pulsing within herself. Then the shadows shifted, and from the darkness emerged figures, twisted, shadowed reflections of people she knew, distorted and terrifying. They reached out with hands that were not quite hands, faces that were not quite faces, and eyes that gleamed with a hunger she could not explain. Seraphine's heart pounded. "Kalen, what are they?" "Your fears," Kalen replied. "Your doubts. They are shaped by the curse to weaken you, to break you from within. Face them. Do not run." She shook, but she forced herself to stand tall. She focused on the warmth in her chest, the spark of magic that Kalen had helped her awaken. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her hands, letting the power flow from her fingers. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in silence, twisting and writhing as if burned by her light. Kalen watched closely, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said. "Do not let them touch your mind. Hold on to yourself." Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time seemed to blur, and Seraphine continued to push the shadows back. Sweat dripped down her forehead and her arms ached, but the fear began to ebb. The shadows began to dissolve, melting into mist, until only Seraphine and Kalen remained in the clearing. She collapsed to her knees, trembling, exhausted but triumphant. I did it," she whispered. Kalen moved beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch was a comfort she had not expected. "Yes," he said, "but this is only the beginning. The curse will test you again, and it will not be merciful." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with both fear and gratitude. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Why not leave me to it?" Kalen's gaze softened, but there was a shadow of pain in it. "Because I have seen what the curse can do, because I have felt its chains, and because I cannot turn away when someone else is caught in its grasp. You are not just another mortal to me, Seraphine. You are different." Her breath caught. The intensity in his eyes, the raw honesty in his voice, struck her deeper than she expected. She wanted to ask more, to understand what he meant, but words failed her. All she could do was nod, feeling a strange warmth in her chest that was both frightening and exhilarating. Days turned into nights as they moved through the forest, training and preparing. Kalen taught her not only to control her magic, but also to listen, to the wind, to the earth, to the shadows that whispered secrets. Each lesson brought them closer, and Seraphine began to see the humanity beneath Kalen's fearsome reputation. She saw the loneliness that had shaped him, the loss that had hardened him, and the kindness that he rarely allowed himself to show. At the same time, she could feel her own strength growing. She could sense the ebb and flow of magic, the way shadows bent to her will, the way fear could be turned into focus. And with each passing day, the emblem on her wrist pulsed less violently, as if responding to her newfound control. One evening, as the crimson moon rose again, they settled near a small stream that glimmered like silver in the dim light. Seraphine knelt by the water, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across its surface. Kalen stood nearby, his expression unreadable as always, yet she felt his gaze resting on her. "You are learning quickly," he said softly, "faster than I expected." She looked up at him, startled. "Faster than you expected? Do you mean it is dangerous?" Kalen's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Not dangerous, impressive. You have more courage than most mortals I have met, and more strength." Her cheeks flushed at the words. "Strength, I feel it sometimes, but it's so hard to control. What if I fail?" Kalen knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Then I will help you," he said. "But I believe you will not fail. The curse may test you, but you are not alone. And sometimes that is the greatest strength of all." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. There was something in his tone, an intensity, a care, that made her pulse quicken. She wanted to ask him to stay, to explain what he felt, but the night air seemed too vast, too alive with shadows for such words. Instead, she nodded, letting silence stretch between them, filled with unspoken emotion. But the forest was not done testing them. As they prepared to rest, a distant howl pierced the night, followed by the rustling of leaves and snapping of branches. Seraphine's pulse quickened. Shadows moved faster now, shapes twisting and sliding through the mist. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "Stay close," he commanded, and in an instant his figure became a guardian, a shield between her and the unseen threat. He moved with a predator's grace, every motion precise, every glance calculating. Seraphine felt the fear rising, but it was tempered by a strange sense of security. He would protect her, even at the risk of his own life. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a creature of shadow and smoke, its form shifting constantly, impossible to define. Seraphine's magic flared instinctively, and Kaelin's golden eyes glowed as he prepared to meet it. The creature hissed, advancing, testing their defenses. Kaelin's hand brushed hers instinctively. "Focus, Seraphine," he said. "Trust your power, trust yourself." She felt the warmth of his hand, the steady confidence in his presence, and a surge of determination rose within her. Together, they faced the creature. Their combined power created a wave of light and shadow that struck the being, scattering it into mist. Breathless, Seraphine looked at Kaelin. His expression was fierce but calm, as if the encounter had been nothing more than a lesson. And yet she could feel the bond between them deepening, born not of words, but of shared struggle, trust, and survival. As the night drew to a close, Seraphine realized something profound. The curse, the shadows, and the dangers of the forest had revealed not only her own strength, but also the depth of her connection to Kaelin. It was no longer just fear that tied them together. It was trust, respect, and something more fragile and powerful, hope. And yet, even as she felt this, a new fear whispered in the back of her mind. The cursed emblem pulsed faintly on her wrist, a reminder that their trials were far from over. Something waited for them, older, stronger, and more merciless than any shadow or creature they had faced so far. She looked up at Kaelin, who was watching the horizon, his expression unreadable. "What is coming?" she asked softly. Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Soon you will know, and it will demand everything from us, strength, courage, and sacrifice, but together we may survive it." Seraphine nodded, gripping the emblem on her wrist. She felt fear, yes, but also determination. She would not run, she would not falter, not now, not ever. And in the shadows of the forest, as the crimson moon faded into the dawn, both knew the truth. The greatest trial was yet to come, and it would test not only their power but the fragile, unspoken bond that had begun to grow between them. The ruins of Ebonmere lay silent under a sky streaked with crimson and black. The once great castle, now shattered by centuries of war and betrayal, seemed almost alive, whispering secrets of old bloodlines and broken promises. Lady Seraphine stood at the edge of the central courtyard, her wrist glowing faintly with the emblem of the curse. She had come far, through shadows, trials, and nights of fear, but now at the heart of the kingdom's darkness, the final test awaited. Beside her, Kaelin's tall figure was a steady anchor. The Vampire King had walked beside her through trials that would have broken any mortal, guiding, teaching, protecting, yet never controlling. His golden eyes held something new now, not just caution or calculation, but hope and determination, tempered with the weight of centuries. He turned to her, voice low, almost a whisper, yet it carried across the ruins. "Are you ready, Seraphine?" She swallowed hard. Her heart thumped in her chest. I think so," she said, though doubt flickered like a shadow. "I've learned much, but what if it's not enough?" Kaelin shook his head. "You are stronger than you know. You have faced fear, shadows, and your own doubts. That is more than enough. But this is about trust, trust in yourself and trust in us." The wind carried whispers from the ruins, voices that seemed to come from the stones themselves. Seraphine shivered but did not step back. The curse pulsed on her wrist, a constant reminder of the stakes. Beyond the shattered gates, she could sense it, A dark presence, ancient and terrible, waiting to reclaim her life as payment for the sins of her bloodline. From the shadows of the broken towers, a figure emerged, a demon of old magic, its eyes like burning coals, its form shifting and terrible. It had been waiting for her, for Kaelin, for this moment, and its presence made the air thick, heavy with power. "You are too late," the creature hissed, its voice like smoke curling around stone. "The debt must be paid, the curse cannot be undone. One life, one soul, it will be claimed tonight." Seraphine gripped her wrist. I will not let it take me," she said, voice trembling but firm. Kaelin's hand brushed hers. "Together," he said simply. "We face it together." The creature lunged, moving faster than her eyes could follow. Shadows stretched from its body, reaching for her, for Kaelin, for the pulse of magic that thrummed between them. Seraphine felt the emblem on her wrist flare violently. The pain was sharp, searing, but she forced herself to focus, to channel the power she had cultivated over weeks of training. Light flowed from her hands, weaving with the shadows that Kaelin commanded. Together their powers collided with the creature's darkness. A wave of energy burst through the ruins, shaking the stones, sending sparks of magic across the courtyard. The demon screamed, twisting, faltering, yet it did not fall. "You are strong," it hissed. "But strength alone is not enough." Kaelin moved closer to Seraphine, his voice soft but firm. "Then we must do more than fight. We must confront it together as equals. Do you trust me?" Seraphine's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of fear, exhaustion, and the pull of the curse. But she also felt something else, trust, fragile and fierce, rooted in the bond that had grown between them. She nodded. "I trust you." Kaelin's hand found hers fully now, and their powers intertwined, flowing as one. Seraphine felt a surge of warmth, not just of magic, but of connection. The shadows and light around them moved in harmony, pulsing to the rhythm of their hearts. The demon shrieked, its form cracking under the combined force, yet still it resisted. "Focus on the bond between us," Kaelin shouted over the roar. "Let it guide the magic." Seraphine closed her eyes, drawing in a deep breath. She remembered every lesson, every fear she had faced, every shadow she had conquered. And she focused on Kaelin, not just as her teacher, not just as the vampire king, but as the being who had trusted her, who had fought beside her, who had become part of her courage. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from them. The ruins trembled, stones shifting, the air vibrating with raw power. The creature screamed, its form unraveling under the unity of their strength. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, it shattered into mist, leaving nothing but silence and the faint scent of smoke. Seraphine collapsed, exhausted, trembling with relief. Kaelin caught her, supporting her weight effortlessly. "You did it," he whispered, his golden eyes soft and filled with awe. We did it." Tears welled in her eyes. She had survived the curse, faced the shadows, and defeated the ancient force that had haunted her family. But more than that, she had discovered something profound. Her own strength, her own courage, and the bond that could not be broken, not by fear, not by darkness. Kaelin lowered her gently to the ground. For a long moment, neither spoke. The ruins were quiet, the moonlight silver and gentle now, as if the night itself were breathing a sigh of relief. "You have grown strong," Kaelin said finally, voice soft. "Stronger than I ever expected. And yet, there is one more truth you must understand." Seraphine looked up at him, curiosity and concern mixing in her gaze. "What truth?" Kaelin's expression darkened slightly, shadowed by centuries of pain. "The curse, it was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to teach you, to prepare you. And now the final price has been paid. But in doing so his voice faltered. She reached for his hand, steadying him. What?" Kaelin's golden eyes met hers, and for the first time vulnerability shone in them. "I am no longer bound by immortality. In using my power to save you, to combine with yours, I have made a choice that will make me mortal. I will age, I will be vulnerable, but I will be free. And we have a chance at life together, truly together. Seraphine felt her breath catch. The man who had seemed untouchable, eternal and terrifying now stood before her, mortal, choosing her life and her bond over his own centuries-long solitude. She reached for his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw, the gold in his eyes, and felt the weight of everything they had endured together. You risked everything," she whispered. Kalen smiled faintly, pain and relief mingling in his gaze. "Because I could not bear to lose you, not after everything, not after seeing your courage, your strength, your heart." Her chest swelled with emotion, a mixture of love, awe, and gratitude. She had faced fear, darkness, and shadows, and now, standing beside Kalen in the ruins of a kingdom that had seen so much tragedy, she realized that their journey had transformed them both. The emblem on her wrist faded gradually, leaving only a faint glow, as if acknowledging that the curse's purpose had been fulfilled. Seraphine pressed her hand to it, feeling the lingering warmth, the reminder of the trials she had endured and the bond she had forged with Kalen. "Is it over?" she asked softly, still catching her breath. Kalen nodded. "For now. The curse is broken, the shadows dispersed, and the darkness that hunted us gone, but we have survived, Seraphine, together." A quiet smile spread across her face. "Together," she echoed. The first light of dawn touched the ruins, painting the stones in soft gold and silver. Seraphine and Kalen stood side by side, looking out over the broken kingdom. The world was not perfect, the castle still in ruins, the shadows still lurking at the edges of the forest, but for the first time in centuries, hope existed. Kalen turned to her, eyes bright with emotion. "This is a new beginning," he said. "For you, for me, for us." Seraphine reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "A new beginning," she agreed. "And I am ready." The wind whispered through the ruins, carrying away the last remnants of the curse. The trees swayed gently, the mist lifted, and the light of the rising sun filled the courtyard. And in that quiet, fragile morning, Seraphine understood the truth she had been discovering for weeks. Courage and love, trust and connection could conquer even the darkest curses. Kalen squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we will face it together. No shadows, no fears, nothing can break what we have built." Seraphine smiled, feeling warmth and strength flood through her. "Nothing," she said, her voice firm. "Not now, not ever." And as the sun rose fully over the kingdom of Ebenmere, lighting the ruins with gold, they stepped forward together, leaving the shadows behind, ready to face a future built on trust, courage, and a bond forged in trials, darkness, and shared triumph. In the silence of the morning, with the curse gone and the shadows dispersed, one truth remained. They had survived the night, and in doing so, they had discovered the most powerful force of all, each other.